What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be brought to you by Mystery Ranch, built for the mission. And if you're not rocking a Mystery Ranch Fireline pack on your back this season, well, your back's probably going to hate you. So listen up. Go over to www.mysteryranch.com and check out their full line of fire equipment. Oh yeah, they got a ton of it. They've got everything. But not only fire equipment do they have a ton of other load-bearing essentials. Everything from hunting, everything. I mean, let's just be honest here. If you need a pack, Mystery Ranch has a solution for you. So go over to www.mysteryranch.com and check it out. And while you're at it, check this out. Go over to the Mystery Ranch Backbone series and apply for the scholarship. The Mystery Ranch Backbone Scholarship is providing $1,000 scholarships to the men and women that go above and beyond during the off season. So if you want your opportunity to win, well, go over to www.mysteryranch.com. And if you want to help support the cause or know somebody who's not in fire and would like to help fund these Backbone series scholarships, well, check this out. They have made their 2 best-selling everyday carry packs into a special line. Oh yeah, the Urban Assault 21 and the 3-way briefcase are built in a new theme. It's a new wildfire black theme, and a portion of those proceeds are going to fund this whole endeavor. So if you want to go check it out, go over to www.mysteryranch.com and check out the Backbone series. And if you think you got a good story to submit, well, go over there and submit it. There's only one way to win. Check them out. The Anchor Point Podcast is also going to be brought to you by our premier coffee sponsor, and that is going to be none other than Hot Shot Brewery. It is kick-ass coffee for a kick-ass cause, and a portion of the proceeds will always go back to the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. But in addition to kick-ass coffee for kick-ass causes, well, they make a ton of other awesome stuff, like a full line of Wildland Firefighter-themed apparel, all of the tools of the trade to get your morning started off right, and check this out, they also support the Anchor Point Podcast, yours truly, by slinging some of our merch. So go over to www.hotshotbrewing.com and check out all that they have to offer. Once again, that is www.hotshotbrewing.com. The Anchor Point Podcast would also like to give a quick little shout out to our buddy Booze over at the Ass Movement. Oh yeah, the anti-surface shitting movement. And yeah, it's that time of year where we're going to be out in the woods a lot more. And I don't know about you guys, but we need to bury the surface shitting problem once and for all. And good for you. You can get some poo-burying propaganda over at www.thefirewild.com and go check out the Ass Movement while you're over there. They've got everything. They've got, if you got a problem pooper on your crew, well, you might want to gift them a patch or a sticker, or maybe even a turd trowel, which I believe they still have, which is hilarious. But yeah, there's nothing more than I hate in the world than coming up to my favorite fly fishing spot or my favorite hiking trail or whatever out in nature and having a human turd gift wrapped in toilet paper. That shit needs to stop. It's disgusting. So if you want to help spread the word about burying your turds, go over to www.thefirewild.com and check out the Ass Movement. And last but not least, the Anchor Point Podcast is going to be brought to you by the Smoky Generation, also known as the American Wildfire Experience. And if you guys don't know what that is yet, well, I highly, highly recommend you go over to www.wildfireexperience.org and check it out. What it is a digital archive, a digital storytelling platform of wildland fire dating all the way back to the 1940s. It's pretty damn epic. There's a collection of over 100 of these stories, and it's pretty damn cool. Also, check this out. They have also done the Smoky Generation grants, or the American Wildfire Experience grants. It's epic. So if you are into telling the story of wildland fire, well, now's your opportunity to go put your name in the hat for one of these Smoky Generation grants. Opportunity to win $500 for telling your story is up on the plate. So if you happen to be a photographer, a writer, a blogger, a videographer, anybody who's telling a story of wildland fire, well, go over to www.wildfireexperience.org and check them out. Bethany, you have a kick-ass organization over there. Keep it up.
The views and opinions of this podcast do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States government, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Defense, the Department of Agriculture, the United States Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or any private, municipal, county, or state firefighting organization, any law enforcement agency, any medical provider, or any contractor employed by any federal agency.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well, and I hope everybody's gearing up for what's becoming a busy fire season. Apologies for the delays in episodes and content, but the last 3 months of mine have been rather hectic. Got a newborn, got a new job, got another new job, just dealing with the family life and everything like that. So apologies for the lack of content, but we're going to get back on our regular schedule here. I can promise you that. We got some big updates coming too, so keep tuned. Anyways, with that being said, today on the show, we're going to talk about mental health, and we're going to talk about the importance of having a plan, both preseason and postseason. We talk about the elephant in the room and all the little topics that are associated with mental health. And check this out. We're going to introduce a new culturally competent clinician to the network that I'm trying to develop here. And she's going to be located here in Reno, Nevada. She's got her own private practice called Stack of Stones, and she specializes in first responders and your community guardians, if you will. So dispatchers, law enforcement, military, firefighters, wildland firefighters. You get the idea. So, ladies and gentlemen, introducing my good friend, Shannon Mead. Welcome to the Anchor Point. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Anchor Point Podcast. Today on the show, I've got my good friend, Shannon Mead. She is a licensed clinician here in Reno, Nevada. What's going on?
Not much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun to do this.
Yeah, so tell me about yourself.
Yeah, like you said, I'm a licensed clinician. I'm technically a marriage and family therapist, and born and bred Reno, Nevada. Grew up here, come from a first responder family, so I am not a wildland firefighter. But I get it. I understand. Been in the family for a long time. And yeah, you want me to jump into bio?
Yeah, sure.
What I do?
Send it.
Okay. Let's start. Well, I was a little girl in Verdi, Nevada. No. It's always so weird to talk about yourself.
But I know, it's super weird.
Yeah.
You're from Verdi?
Yeah.
Oh man, that distillery out there is so good.
It is good.
Oh my God, that mahogany whiskey, that mahogany bourbon that they make.
It is, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I kind of like, they had like a green apple, which is so sad, but I was like, oh, I like it. And then I was so ashamed. But then it was booze, so it helped with the shame. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. See, full circle there.
Full circle. Yeah.
Anyways, I digress.
Yeah. So I grew up in Verdi, and my dad was fire for 40 years. And so I think I saw the impact of the work on him. I didn't understand it. I mean, he loved his job, but I think now that I'm grown up and trained clinician, I'm like, oh, this work is hard, brutally hard.
Kind of started making sense.
Yeah. Just understanding the experience more. And my little sister became a paramedic when she was young too. So then I saw the work on her, or the impact of the work on her, kind of from a different perspective, right? Because
if you don't mind me asking, who's your sister? Can you say that on the air, or you want to tell me later?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But you could,
because if I think who it is, I think she was my instructor. She was literally my AEMT instructor, and she's one hell of a paramedic. She's freaking awesome.
She is awesome. I did not clear it with her to say her name, so I'm not going to.
That's all right. She knows who she is.
Yeah, because you just did the look that I get when people are like, oh, because we look similar.
You do. It just like started putting two to two together.
Yeah.
Anyways, she's awesome.
So, and I saw, she started with the work young.
Yeah.
And so I kind of saw the impact on her differently, but still I wasn't really picking it up. And then fast forward, my husband and I moved to Seattle, Washington, because we wanted to go on an adventure and try something new. Lived up there for a long time. I graduated from UNR with an advertising degree, worked as first in marketing and then in consulting. Love that work. So I haven't been a clinician I'm still technically an intern. So I'm still finishing my licensing hours here.
Yeah.
I'm fully qualified and capable, but I'm still finishing my hours. Because for a long time I was a consultant and I loved that work. I did like analytics, work with big companies, go in, help them figure out how to serve their customers. Everything is good. Then we became licensed as foster parents. And I really had my first impact from compassion fatigue, which at that point I had no idea what that was. There's no training on compassion fatigue for foster parents. Now there's a little bit more, but still
lacking.
Majorly lacking. Yeah. And it's compassion fatigue is a drum I beat constantly because it's, I think it is a very unseen danger. And so, I just got rocked that first year of being a foster parent and ended up needing to quit. I couldn't, my job was pretty high stress, high travel. So I couldn't do that work and take care of my kids. And so I stopped working and just went into a pretty dark space.
Yeah.
And didn't get a lot of help, like saw some therapists that were just not helpful. And in hindsight, it makes me super angry. Like I was drowning and they were not helpful.
Yeah.
So didn't work for a little bit and then was like, okay, am I going to go back to work? And I decided I wanted to pivot because I'd gotten a little dissatisfied with my consulting work because I'd be sitting in these conference rooms of people dealing with their tech and their data needs, seeing that it was clearly people problems. Like I can feel it in a room. Like This person hates this person. These two are sleeping together. This person knows. And like, there's just all these dynamics. And if you can't address any of the people issues, it's really hard to solve the problems in the company.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to pivot. And I went back and got a evidence-based coaching certificate. So my letters technically are ACC from a coaching standpoint. And I really loved that program. I really loved kind of diving into how to help people change, essentially. And at that point, it was coming more from like a corporate standpoint. I was really interested in helping small business owners, stuff like that.
Kind of like the Jocko Willink aspect of it a little bit.
Yeah. A little bit of just like, okay, I really like working with teams. A little education on what MFT means, right? Because clinicians have different degrees. Marriage and family therapy doesn't mean I only work with couples and families. I work with a lot of individuals, but it means I approach the work from a systems perspective. So I am always really interested in how systems work and how one thing impacts another. And if you tweak this thing over here, what does that do for this piece of the system? So
kind of the cause and effect of what you're pulling out and putting back in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if we look at from a therapy perspective, it's like, what habits did we bring into our adult life that are now making it really hard to deal with these stressors and making it really hard to communicate with our partner, stuff like that. So that stuff just fascinates me.
Yeah. So that's another thing I wanted to ask you too is, you mentioned that there's different caveats to therapy and becoming a counselor or a clinician, that sort of thing. So like, what are the different caveats to that? Because there's a lot out there and I have no idea what they are. So could you expand on that a little bit more? Yeah.
Like the different license types and the different like education levels, stuff like that.
Yeah,
totally. So there's some providers out there that are working off of more of a bachelor level and they're generally doing, maybe some work with the substance, stuff like that. A licensed clinician is going to be a master's level or above. So I have a master's degree in technically mine is couple and family therapy, but my license is marriage and family therapy.
Gotcha.
Complications. You also have, so here in Nevada, if I mess this up, I'm really sorry. You're either an MFT or a CPC, which is a certified CPC, certified professional counselor.
Okay.
Sorry, I went to school in Washington. The letters in Washington are different. Plus, I deal with a lot of different letters and a lot of different roles. So I'm always like, wait, who's what? Both CPC and MFT do the same work. We're doing therapy.
Gotcha.
Just our training's just a little different. The MFT is a lot more systems. We're a lot more interested in like family history. CPC is also equally interested in that, but sometimes works more on just like the individual experience.
I gotcha.
That's an imperfect explanation, but
no. Well, I just know that there's a lot of different letters and little things out there that kind of, it's all kind of relative to the same scope, if you will. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah. Well, then, so at my level, some of the limitations are I don't do anything with medication.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing medication or like, testing for ADHD or something like that, then you're moving over to the psychiatrist, psychologist. more the doctorate level.
Gotcha.
professionals. So,
Okay.
which is fine. I don't want to do anything with meds, so I'm good to go.
I don't blame you. That's tricky. Yeah. Well, that's another thing too with medication too. And I'm getting off into the weeds here, but once you start throwing medications on top of a unaddressed issue at the cause of it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain people with certain chemical imbalances that contribute to these things. But if it's like we were talking about this earlier off record, and we were talking about like, oh yeah, you have this past trauma, doesn't necessarily need to be medicated, or maybe it does, but you need to address that underlying issue first.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't blame you.
Yeah. Meds are a tool and they're fantastic. Like I mean, I'm on an antidepressant after the last year just because it's been so drawn out.
It was a shit year.
It was a shit year in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And so I kind of hit a point where I'm like, man, I'm going to go talk to my doctor. And so, yeah, break the stigma. I'm on Lexapro. Right. And it's been great. It's like helped me I'm literally an expert in coping skills and stuff. And I got to the point where I like couldn't even get the energy to go take a walk and stuff. And I was like, okay, I need a little bump. And it's been fantastic.
Hey, if it works, it works.
Yeah. It's really kind of helped. So
that's another question too I always have for clinicians is who takes care of the clinicians though? Because you see, especially in your scope of practice, you're working with first responders. You're a culturally competent clinician. Yeah. See?
Yeah.
We have another one. Yeah. You work and you see like some of the worst and the best that humanity has to offer. And who takes care of that trauma? Because when you're experiencing all of this stuff and you're helping people, guiding them through their traumas, who takes care of you? Because you absorb some of that. Yeah,
absolutely. Therapists should have therapists. If you're seeing a therapist who never sees a therapist, no, run away. So I have an awesome therapist that I see. And then I also have a coach that I see from more of like a business perspective, but also we can't live in an echo chamber. We can't live in our own head all the time. The purpose of other professionals is just to help us unpack the patterns, right? We were kind of talking before we started recording about I like patterns.
Yeah.
And I can't solve my own patterns sometimes. So I need to go and I sit down, like I'll know I'm off. I know something's bothering me. And that's what I'm like, okay, I'm off. Something's wrong here. I don't know what it is. And my therapist will start kind of poking through like, well, what about this? What about this? And she helps me pull the pieces out. And then I'm more able to deal with what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I need that and I'm an expert at doing it, that means that it's something we just like, it's reasonable for everybody to need help. That sounded really pompous, but
it's true though.
Hopefully it made sense.
Yeah. Everybody needs help.
Yeah. Like if you feel like you need help, it's not because you suck at life. It's because you're human and we need help.
Well, we're a social creature though. That's the thing. It's like we rely on each other as a foundation of society, basically. So, I mean, we all got to lean on each other to make ourselves more successful in some way or another.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not arrogant at all. It's just human nature.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that I just fight against day in and day out is this idea that it is weakness to go ask for help, or it's weakness to rely on others. And it's not true. It's strength to rely on others.
Oh, absolutely.
But the stigma within all these different professions is just so deep and so strong.
Especially the first responder, you had a certain term for it. You had
I use the word guardians. One of the things that is really important to me is kind of pulling everyone together, that shared humanity. So all the different roles from first responder to healthcare to social services. We were talking a little bit about death care. Like I always want to make sure we're wrapping in the morticians. Like this is hard work.
Oh yeah.
I think animal services, they see some shit, right? So I consider them to be a guardian professional. Yeah. And I had to come up with a word because helping professionals is kind of lame. Like, congratulations, you're a helping professional. And so I agree.
That's kind of a lame term.
Right. Like, so I started using guardian. Like I needed a term. Yeah. And I'm like, you are the guardians of your community, right? You come in and you take care of people in their worst days. And no matter what the role is, right? They're different uniforms, different roles. The trauma and the compassion fatigue and the secondary trauma, all that stuff is similar and shared. And so that's what I'm all about helping with.
Gotcha. And I know that you're also plugged in pretty well with like the first responder community and like Northern Nevada Peer Support Network as well. So let's talk about how'd you get hooked up with those guys?
How did I? Derek, you're going to have to remind me. I don't know. Do you feel like you have like a COVID memory lapse?
I do. Yes.
I feel like there's just this year that like baseball season restarted. So then we're seeing all these parents we know, but I'm like, wait, which kid goes with which parents? Like pre-COVID stuff, I just have like these memory lapses. So literally, I think I just reached out. Like I knew Derek, we were talking before he started the network kind of about how, maybe, I pinged him because I did a pilot program right before COVID. So I did a pilot program with REMSA, Truckee Meadows Fire and RPD to kind of figure out how to take better care of peer support, right? Because that idea of who helps the helpers.
Yeah.
I really want to make sure we're taking good care of our peer support teams because they're taking a double burden. And so we ran this like training pilot, which went really well. And then COVID happened and everything fell apart. But.
Yeah. Talk about a huge wrench in a gear. Holy shit, man. COVID sucked.
COVID was, and it was, there was so much loss. And that's part of why I want to kind of talk about grief and loss today is I think from a society level, we are in the middle of just a period of grief that we don't have words for. And it messed with us.
Oh yeah. And then it's compounded by all the other shit that's happening besides the COVID, I mean, yeah, all the things that have happened over the past year, it seems like it's been 5 years condensed into one.
Yeah.
With the amount of events that have happened.
Yeah. And it like, literally, I feel like I have some memory loss and some like function. Like we did the baseball banquet earlier this week and nobody had masks on. And I was so like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. This is horrible. This is wonderful. Like, I don't even know how to feel about
what
this.
To think about this.
Like, I don't know what to do. And then you have to sneeze and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to sneeze. What do I do? Right.
Everybody in the room's going to turn around and look at you.
Everything has gotten so hard. It's just a sneeze, but everything is really different and hard. And it's, yeah.
Speaking of COVID, do you think there's like some sort of like COVID shaming and COVID guilt like going on? I mean, this is kind of one of those controversial topics. I mean, I'm vaccinated. I had COVID. I still got a vaccine.
Yeah.
I got my own decision. It's my own decision to make that. So I made that decision with my risk factors and my family risk factors that are taken into consideration with that decision to get it. But it seems like there was a lot of people like just using it as like some sort of social pinnacle of like, look at how like this virtue signaling, like, look at me, I'm doing the right thing. And it seems like they went out of their way, those particular individuals, to like shame other people for not getting a vaccination. Yeah. Wear a fucking mask during the height of the pandemic, but the vaccination, I can understand your choice of not wanting to get that. Now, I'm not advocating to not get the vaccine,
right? But
do your research, if you will. I hate using that term, but
yeah,
why shame somebody over that?
I almost feel like it's a continuation of I just feel like we've really lost our ability to have a good debate.
Yeah.
To have a good conversation about something. I'm getting way geekier as I get older. And so I've started reading like biographies. Like I just finished one.
Nerd.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm so embarrassed. I also really like watching birds all of a sudden. I don't know. I turned 40 and things are getting weird.
Hey man, I had a kid and I started to get like white pairs of New Balances and I don't know. I think like lawnmowers, the coolest things ever.
Yeah. There you go.
Light beer.
Light beer. Oh no. Too far.
Every once in a while, I like a good Coors Light and I'll go like do yard work.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Hold on. I'm going to have to recover for a second.
See, there's that shaming thing again.
But we've lost, I've been reading these historical books about, Churchill, and I just started one about Lincoln, and there was joy in debate. There was joy in disagreement. And I feel like we've gotten to a place where it's just that joy is not there. Like
my way or the highway kind of mentality.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of distance and I think there's a lot of fear. Right. And so the vaccination debate just feels like a continuation of that.
It does, in a sense.
I blame social media.
Well, it's easy to get stuck into that echo chamber on social media too. And like Twitter, 240 characters is the worst fucking way to communicate an idea, especially with like nuance and complexity, such as getting a vaccination or not. It doesn't make any sense to communicate that way. It's just, it's a downward spiral. It only goes one way, and that's downhill and real fucking quick too. Yeah.
And you get, we were talking before about the noisiest people get the most attention.
Absolutely.
Like the reasonable folks are living their lives. They're mowing their lawns with their Coors Lights. They're not on social media all night, just like raging.
Just looking for an opportunity to like bitch or complain or attack somebody.
Yeah.
It's obnoxious, man.
Yeah. And so the vaccine thing, and it's tricky, you know, like even figuring out for my office mate and I were trying to figure out, because I share my office with another therapist.
Yeah.
Like what's our rule? Like, where are we at with masks? What do we do? You know,
And there's also compliance with the state on top of that too,
Yeah.
which throws another layer of complexity on top of it.
right. And you know, we're in an office building with different professionals. And so wanting to respect their wishes, and it's nuanced and it's hard to know the right answer. And you have to be able to have a conversation and disagree. And I feel like we've lost some of that, especially in the last year. Right?
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. Well, everybody's locked in their houses, you know, and just glued to social media.
mhm.
So it's there's that downward spiral again.
Yeah. And watching the news is not, you know,
Ugh.
so
I'm not a fan.
yeah. So it's a tricky thing, and trying to figure out how to like ask, you know, because I'm vaccinated too. I'm pretty comfortable being in an office with someone,
Yeah.
but wanting to respect their comfort. But then as a therapist, not seeing people's faces is,
Super weird. You can't read expressions.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. Zoom was wonderful because Zoom gives way more access, right?
Yeah. Silver lining out of it. Telemedicine, telehealth. That's
Huge.
that's killer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us also figured out that we could do our jobs from our houses.
Right. Yeah.
Which comes with its own set of problems.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole nother episode.
The inescapable workload.
Homeschooling. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I do not feel bad, or I do not feel good for the students that are out there, man, especially what they had to go through.
Oh, it's just been, and the teachers have just been through it. Yeah.
Ringer, man.
Yes.
But yeah, it's one of those things. I'm a firm believer in individual liberties,
Mhm.
and if you're going to make the decision to put something into your body, that should be your choice, right?
Right.
My body, my choice. I
Mhm.
can do that. I respect that.
Yep.
However, you need to take into account of the people around you,
Mm-hmm.
your family, all those at-risk populations as well, and make the best decision on the information that we've got, especially with something so new, but there's not a lot of
Yeah.
information on.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate
It's-
to say it, but we are the test.
Yeah. We're
There's
the
no
guinea
two
pigs,
ways around.
folks.
We are.
Yeah.
I made that decision. That's my
Mhm.
decision.
Yeah.
You don't want to get it? Well, play dumb games. You win stupid prizes. It may help. It may not.
Yeah. And I think we're in this weird place where we had to be both isolated. So one of the things I think that was kind of nice that came out of COVID was there's some really great advertising for a while. I'm an advertising
yeah.
geek,
There was.
but there was some really good stuff about like community and coming together.
Yeah.
But it was this weird, we had to be isolated, and now we're trying to figure out how to come back together. We're trying to figure out how to be social again, how to gather. And it's hard. Like I think, going back to my decision to take some meds is like, this stuff is just exhausting. There's a real thing called decision fatigue.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. You make so many choices in a day, and now we're having to make choices about everything that used to be really simple. And it's just worn us down.
That and the scheduling too. I mean, you knew you're going into work from 8 to 5
Mhm.
or whatever your schedule was.
Yep.
Unless you happen to be a wildland firefighter and you're gone for 14 days at a time for 16 hours a day.
And then
A little different.
you have some limits, but they're real wide limits. Yeah.
Yeah. The margin is there, definitely wider there. But it's like you have this schedule and this routine that you got into, and have that all broken down and just thrown out the wayside for a lot of the public.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be hard.
Oh, structure is key. And I think, that's one of the things I want to talk about today is this idea of how do you put structure back in when you return from the season, right? All of a sudden you had Wildland is really unstructured, but it's really structured, right? It's both at the same time.
Yeah. It's like a paramilitary organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, but there's chaos, but there's structure. Like it's a very confusing place that is completely unlike your home life.
Mhm.
And I like in her episode, Dr. Oz said, you have to come back and get on a moving train. And I thought that was such a good way to put it.
Oh, she's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. But you're jumping into a completely different structure. And like as humans, we need structure.
Yeah.
And so that transition is hard, just general wildland season. But for the entire world, all of our structure was completely fucked. It was just gone. And that the strain of that is really real.
Oh, yeah. That and the way that we had to handle all the little nuances and complexities within dealing with COVID and responding to emergencies.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Holy shit, man. That's a nightmare scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you deal with that? And then how do you get off of that family unit, which is your crew,
Yes.
and then integrate back into your own family unit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's hard.
It's Yeah. And we, one of the things we talked about before that I want to talk about today is this idea of dialectics, which is both two things being true.
Mm-hmm.
And you're switching from one family to the other and you're excited, but you're maybe not wanting to go back to the boring off-season life, right?
Guilty.
There's something fun about being out there. Call it what it is. Transitioning back, you're both happy to see your family, but then there's diapers, and then, it may be harder to interact with friends and family. And so you're balancing these two competing emotions. And it's real. First of all, if you're out there, it's real.
Yeah.
It's called dialectics. And if you're struggling with that, it's because that's a human response.
Yeah. Well, and you saw the survey results. I mean, it's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the comfortability being in a public setting,
Mm-hmm.
it's like people are wildly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So dialectics. What is that?
Dialectics. Okay. So dialectics let me back up a little bit. Here's my general stance to mental health. We've got to have a balance of two things. We have to both understand what we need, understand what's going on, which is harder than you think,
Mhm.
right? Going back to that idea of the therapists need therapists, we just need people to help us sometimes because it's a big foggy mess of life.
Yeah.
So you have to understand what's going on. You need to be able to assess the situation, which all guardians do. This is your job, is assessing the situation.
Yeah.
We're just not, the academies don't teach us to assess ourselves, right? And
True.
So we have to understand what's going on, and then we have to know what to do about it. And so in everything I do, whether it's with a client or in a training, it's balancing these two pieces: understanding, assessing, and then knowing how to respond appropriately.
Gotcha.
So one of the reasons I like to make sure we define words and normalize that things are real is it helps us assess what's going on. So dialectics is real. So if you're headed home and you're just off and you don't know why, it may be that you've got these competing emotions about it, and that's okay. Like that's not weakness. It's not brokenness. It doesn't mean you hate your kids. It's just life. It's complicated. The word for it is dialectics. Sometimes it helps to have a word because then it's real.
There's your 50-cent word of the day.
50-cent word of the day.
Dialectics.
You have to do it with your radio voice.
And ladies and gentlemen, your 50-cent word of the day is dialectics.
Perfect. Excellent.
So now I know that's an all too common thing, especially in our community, coming from my focal point, which is Wildland.
Yep.
Because I don't know anything else. I don't know military. I don't know LEO. I mean, I can see it from the outside looking in, but
Yep.
Oftentimes when I was a younger man, when I was a younger firefighter, I'd fucking hate coming home.
Mhm.
And then I get this weird like guilt
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing I wanted to do more than just be out in the woods with my homies digging holes in the dirt, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's fun.
It's awesome.
And then coming home and then having this like weird sense of guilt that I'm not holding up to my family's expectations and like reconnecting with them, but also wanting to be back into the field with my fire family.
Yep.
What causes that? Is there like a reason for that, or has it even been studied?
I think the cause is being a human being, right? Like being, like you said, digging holes in the forest is fun.
Yeah.
It's also less complicated sometimes.
Lighting shit on fire is a little bit more complicated, but it's a lot more fun than the drudgery of like societal norms.
Yeah. And coming back to like baby showers, right? Stuff
It's exhausting.
There's just a lot. And I think we could probably say that there's maybe a personality type that's much more likely to go do Wildland to start with.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And then you're coming back and doing some of the minutia of life that's just it's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
But then that guilt and shame piece is huge because then you feel like there's something wrong with you because you don't want to come back and go to the baby shower.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the cause is humanity. And the thing that makes it worse is we feel like we're broken because we feel that way.
I never really felt broken because I understood, that's my personal perspective, is like I understood why I enjoyed it so much. It was very fulfilling for a sense of purpose, and you get to see the most wild sunsets and the most beautiful places that untouched by humanity. It's a fucking cool job.
Yeah.
However, I felt more like an addict than anything else. I was always constantly chasing that high.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my thing. It's like, I realized I was consciously aware of this, but I just want to chase that next IA or that next falling assignment or that next helicopter ride up the top of the hill.
Well, you are literally chasing a high.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah.
It's stress hormones are fantastic. right? It's like the endorphins, the adrenaline, all of it mixes together, and it's exciting and it's fun. I work with this with all kinds of different clients, right?
Mhm.
So if you're just doing regular local firework, it's the same thing. Like your body is activated. You're waiting for tones to go out. You don't know what's going to happen. It might just be the same medical call over and over and over, but it might be something on fire.
Yeah,
Let's just be honest. Things on fire are kind of fun,
a little bit.
right?
No, they're super fun. I'm not. There's not even a little bit about it.
And there's a that's part of like let's keep working through the understanding piece, but part of the action is being aware of the fact that your body is not, I don't know if I want to use the word like detoxing, but you're kind of coming down a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's real.
Oh yeah. Even in the off season, I mean, what do Wildland folks specifically do? They go and ski bum. They chase that high on the hill.
Yep.
They go rafting or hunting or like these totally A-type, like high chasing, high risk scenarios. They'll go backpacking in the middle of fucking nowhere for no cell phone. They won't even tell anybody that they're going. They just want to go do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's closely related to their field of work too.
Exactly. You're skirting danger a little bit.
Yeah.
And
skydiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge one.
Mm-hmm. And it's real.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird though. And that's the thing too, is like, that's the whole point of this conversation that I'm having with you and that you're having with me, is we kind of connected with this whole idea that this is absolutely normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's my biggest, like, I feel like I say it all week long. This is an appropriate response. Like you are responding as you should as a human being, but there's this stigma piece that just weighs us all down where we feel like I shouldn't feel this way. And I talked a little bit ago about that idea of confusion. I think that if we're feeling confused about what's going on, that just adds to this, like, what is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of why I'm like on this battle to name different things, give people words, right? 50-cent words. If they help you understand what's going on, it's a huge part of the battle.
Well, a huge other part of the battle too is breaking that stigma, like you've been saying constantly here. It's like, if you need help, seek it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also you got to seek somebody that speaks the language like yourself.
That's the thing, is for all of you who have gone out and tried a therapist and it was a bad fit, I'm primarily sorry, because it just sucks. I know how hard it is to reach out in a moment when you're just really struggling and to get shitty help. I'm sorry, and try again. And if it's not a good fit, that's okay. Therapists are kind of like dating, right? You got to kind of try different people out. We have different personalities, and you need that culturally competent piece. And then you need to find someone who's just a good fit with your personality. So if you tried once and hated it, please try again for me. Yeah.
But it's also hard to find those culturally competent clinicians as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things they've done at the Peer Support Network that I love, is they have a page of culturally competent clinicians. So go look. There's a list of people that have been vetted by different organizations. And so you know that they're going to be a bit more aware of the stresses of your work, a bit less likely to cry about the dead baby stories, some of those key things that are just really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like finding those people, or where was I going with this? I'm sorry. So the culturally competent clinicians, right? They're not readily available. And even more so is that we do have these resources typically, like every department, whether it's LEO, municipal fire, state, even private contractors and the federal government, they all have some sort of EAP program.
Yeah.
But the problem is with those is typically, some are better than others, but typically they don't connect you with a culturally competent clinician.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, at least from the responses that you saw in the mental health survey, it was like 80-something% of the respondents said that EAP was a fucking joke. They rated their level of service as poor. And I just want to kind of like make it a point to say, like, if EAP is not working for you, you also got to seek the means to do it on your own. It might come with some consequences, some financial consequences as well, but you got to take care of yourself, and you got to, if you're not fit for duty,
right?
How are you going to be able to do this job?
Right. And fit for duty, both for the immediate needs of this fire season, but also what do you want it to look like when you're retired?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of grandparent do you want to be? Like, you want to be able to engage with the world around you for the long haul.
Yeah.
And the work will wear you down. So it's hard. If I could do the work for free, I would, but until someone gives me a whole bunch of money, also an option. you have to invest in it. And my thought is you invest in gear, right? You invest in vehicles, you invest in like toys that you play with in the off season, invest in yourself and your mental health at the same level, because it's so important.
Oh yeah. I should even Ben Strawn. He was on the podcast. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that episode, but it was pretty heavy. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
But he said, if you're going to be waiting around for the government or EAP to fix your problems, you're going to be waiting a long fucking time.
I was like, yes, get after it.
Yeah. So there's something to be said about that. It's like, yeah, take the steps that are necessary to fix it. It may be something as simple as peer support and just talking it out with a peer.
Yep.
Or it could be something that, hey, I want a one-on-one with a clinician like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things too, is you don't want to be relying on your agency for your life. This is your life, right?
It's also your career too. It's your livelihood and your life.
Yeah. And if we're waiting around for an organization to fix what we need as an individual, we may end up waiting a long time.
Yeah.
And they're trying, like EAPs are a great attempt. It's just not working.
Yeah.
And so you are going to need to advocate for who you are, for your, your marriage or your family or whatever you want your life to look like. It's on us individually. I pay for my therapy out of pocket.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like insurance won't always cover this. So be prepared for that, but also understand and recognize the value that this brings back to your well-being.
Yep.
That's a huge component of it. Yeah. It might cost, a couple $100, but what's that going to turn into?
Exactly.
6, 8, 12 months down the road.
Yep.
For years even.
Yeah. There's the joke about like therapy is expensive, but divorce is way more expensive, right?
Oh yeah. And that's a problem that plagues our community. And that's military law enforcement, municipal fire, federal wildland, all wildland. Yeah. It's hard.
It's because the work is hard on marriage. It just is we talked a little bit about how much I dream of more integrated mental health work within like the academy or the school level. Some of it is like, how do you go home and tell your spouse about what happened? And we're not training on the words, right? We're not training on how do you do this? How do you go talk about dead babies without talking about dead babies? That's not trained on, but it's essential to having a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing too, is because we are experts when it comes to communication as far as our line of work goes.
Yep. But
when it comes to a peer-to-peer or like person to significant other kind of line of communication, we fucking suck at it. I still suck at it.
It's just different. It's different.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you can't talk to your wife or your kid or whoever your significant other is like you're a rookie bitch on a hotshot crew. You just can't do that. Or you can't talk to them like your superintendent either.
Yep. I've asked that question quite a few times. So do you feel like you go home and use like your firehouse voice? You see people go, oh yeah, I think I might do that. I'm like, okay, it's probably not working.
See the face I'm making right now. I still do it. I'm far removed from fire. I'm 2 years out of the game and I still talk like some rotorhead bro. Yeah.
Your wife asked you to go to the store and you're like, copy that.
Shit. No shit. That's what I say. Yeah. Copy that. And I like concise communications. So like get to the point. I don't need a list and why we need this stuff. Just tell me what we fucking need and I'll go get it, which I'm getting better at, trying to, I don't know, get around that whole way of communication. It takes a long time to break those habits though. Yeah.
Well, because you realize it's life and death, right? When you're at work, it's life and death. So you train and you drill and you get good at that, but there's no like, how do I undo this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of which, I mean, how do we undo this?
Yes. Okay. One, that's not a question I can answer for everybody. So I would say that each person, a lot of the work I do is this idea of how do you individually know what you need? Because there's a transition point. There's like for law enforcement, they're actually taking off a vest, right?
Yeah.
But for all these different roles, there's a take off of the role and the shit that happened, whether it's you're out on that fire or you just finished a shift at the hospital, whatever it is, we need to have a plan specifically for how to take it off and how to kind of reintegrate. And we need to be able to communicate that plan to the people around us, right? So you need your individual plan and you need to be able to tell your wife, like, it was a real bad day. This is what I'm going to do. And she needs to know what you're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense to me. But I kind of asked you a loaded question there by giving a generalized response for a very individual like prescription, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's unpacking all those little traumas and all those little things that happen while you're on the line and not having it bottled up inside you.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Because once that cork comes out of that bottle, it's a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
I know I'm guilty of it.
Well, and the scarier thing to me is almost the cork stays in for too long and then it gets gross, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it explodes and it's just like the
toxic,
the homebrew on the ceiling, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do have some not specific, but some general thoughts for how to kind of decompress after the season's over.
Okay.
But I want to name a couple more things first.
Send it.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I want to name is grief. Do it, radio voice.
Grief.
So huge. And if like, as I listen through all your different episodes, there is a thread of grief through all of it.
Oh yeah.
And the thing about grief is it's super vague. Like we suck at handling it, especially as Americans. We just do not like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We suck at it culturally, within the American culture. Then if you put on this first responder culture,
it's even amplified.
Grief is just not a thing.
Yeah.
So I want to name it because I think what I hear a lot, like even when you're talking about coming home and the cork explodes, I think a lot of times there's a ton of loss and grief that happen that we don't know what it is. And it shows up as anger. That's the only way we know how to express it. And so the metaphor I use for grief is, it's kind of like when you hit your funny bone. So you hit your funny bone.
Nobody likes it.
Nobody likes it, right? There is a point of impact and it like the pain goes all the way up your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is the emotion that comes from loss. So loss is the impact. Loss is when you hit your funny bone. Grief is kind of the pain that radiates up your arm. And it's not always clear. Like you don't always know what's happening, but it's there. The pain is there. It's having an impact. And so I think when we name the different types of grief, then when you're coming home, you're coming down off the line, you're trying to reintegrate into family life, it gives you the ability to know where you're at, meet your needs, and then you can have a more reasonable conversation with the people around you.
You have better tools to communicate.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So I want to name a couple different types of loss because this is the thing is there's all these losses that you're experiencing out there that you may not be recognizing as loss. And so it's just contributing to like a stew of shit, right?
Yeah. It's that toxic shit being held back by a cork. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So the loss we all understand is loss of life, right?
Yeah.
Someone dies. We feel that grief is one, it's more unavoidable, but we have a context for it, right? We have funerals. You bring casseroles. Like we have some things we do around loss of life.
Yeah.
But that loss of life can get more complex. So the one word I want to give is this idea of complex grief, right? If that loss of life is because of a suicide, then all of a sudden, not only are we sad, but we're angry. Maybe we feel guilty or shameful. And that grief becomes more stew-like. The sludge gets thicker, right? Same thing if let's say you have a really difficult relationship with somebody in your life and they die. So not only are you maybe sad or guilty, you might be relieved. And that when the sludge gets darker, then we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to understand it. And that's when we get more and more silent, more and more kind of isolated and locked down. But that complex grief is intense. It's real. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. That's one thing too I wanted to talk about is the grief component, at least specific to wildland firefighters that are not all risk.
Yeah.
Because we don't deal with the dead babies. We don't deal with the MVAs.
Yeah. We
don't deal with, picking up grandma and grandpa at 3 a.m. for a lift assist. We don't really do that.
Yep.
I think the grief that we have to deal with is our decision points that didn't end up successful.
Yes.
And the snowball effects around that, or like seeing your peers or the public suffer. Like there's nothing worse than going through a nuked out subdivision. That is fucking horrible.
Yep.
It sucks.
And so another 50-cent word, you're getting so many words. You're welcome, everybody. Is this idea of, so you've probably heard of vicarious trauma or secondary trauma.
Yes.
I really think we've got this vicarious grief, right? They're not your houses in this neighborhood.
No. And we did everything we could.
You did everything, but you're absorbing it. We're human beings, right?
Yeah.
When one person yawns, the other person yawns. It's called mirror neurons. It's a thing. And so when you're seeing devastation, I have a little list here of the stuff that's specific to wildland, because you're right. It's not the dead babies. It's not the car crashes.
I mean, some of us are all risk. I mean, Cal Fire, I know the majority of them are all risk. So
yeah. But I think it's easier to understand when you're all risk. So then when you're not, you're like, why am I so upset? You just drove through a burned out neighborhood. It sucked and you feel sad, but that might come out as anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot too. I mean, I think that the complexities of wildland specific, if they're not all risk, I think it's a little bit, it's different. It's still in the same realm of all risk and LEO and military and all this other stuff. I mean, it's all kind of interrelated, right?
Totally.
But with wildland, we don't experience that. So it's just different.
It's different. And do you think that different raises some of the like silence and shame? Because you're like, I shouldn't be this upset.
To a degree, yes. Okay. But I don't know. Then outside looking in, and I'm looking back at all this stuff that I've personally experienced. Like I was telling you about the time the helicopter crash, or the time where I almost got fucking burnt over with one of my best friends. Those are like experiences in my life that it's kind of like hard to unpack those, I guess you could say. And that is like, where did the failure come from in this? It's like trying to analyze that situation of why did this happen? And sometimes there's just no closure. Shit happens.
Yeah.
It's easy to say that now after I've kind of looked back and removed myself from the fire situation.
Yep.
Those are the things that I think plague a lot of our community.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it's that fixer mentality, right? My job is to fix it, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And there's that in and of itself as a loss. So I have my little list of losses here. And that's what, like, I couldn't fix it. I couldn't succeed. I couldn't save the house. Right. Yeah. That is a loss. That is an elbow hit that is legit. And it leaves us just a little funky. And what happens is they compile. Right.
Yeah. Snowballs. Right.
Yeah. They build over time. And then there's these other little losses, like the majority of anyone out fighting fire has an affinity for nature, and you are watching it go up in smoke. Oh yeah. Right. And you then add in the complexity of opinions on policy and, global warming. Like there's all these other pieces where bullshit of bureaucracy. Yeah. And you're literally like seeing dead squirrels, and that's a loss. And so I think I want to name that, like, that's a loss. When you see a devastated piece of what used to be absolutely beautiful, there's loss in that. Yeah. And it leaves us sad. I think it does. I think a lot of people like shove it off and be like, yeah, part of the gig. Oh yeah, there's a dead deer. There's half this head of cattle is gone, got burnt over, got caught. Or this historical monument in the middle of nowhere got burnt down. Part of the gig. We did what we could, but you still, I think no matter how much of a hard ass you pretend to be about it, I think you still take something away from that, like you're saying. Yeah. I feel like for anyone, if that thought goes through your mind, it's part of the job, catch that. Because I think that's the like little Band-Aid that we put on the hard shit that minimizes the fact that it sucks. It is part of the gig, but that doesn't mean it doesn't suck, right? Going back to dialectics, like it's true. This is part of the job. This is what you signed up for. Yeah. And it sucks. And you can feel sad. Like those are both true. Oh, absolutely. I mean, embrace the suck is a kind of common phrase that we use. And it's true. It's part of the gig. Yeah, it fucking sucks. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't be not sad about it. Exactly. Yeah. Embracing the suck doesn't mean enjoying the suck. Like, that's the different, like, yeah. You go home and you're a little messed up, and that's okay. Yeah. It's unpleasant, but real. So what other topics do you got for us? Okay, so let's finish up on grief, and then let's talk about what we do about it. Okay. Because I don't want to be like, now you're sad. Have a nice day. And that's the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Do your sponsorship piece. Now everyone's sad, right? But I do want to catch. So a couple other things you lose is you lose moments, right? Yes. If you're out on the line for 14 days, you're missing babies for steps. You're missing birthday parties. You're missing things. And that is a loss. And if you feel conflicted about that, it's real. You're also potentially losing relationships. We talked about the fire family to, I don't want to say real family, but that's not a correct term, but that's a loss.
Yeah.
And so naming, this is a loss, I'm going to feel funky. And then this showed up in your data, loss of purpose, right?
Yes.
That loss of focus, direction, purpose, a little bit of the loss of status, right? So all the signs that say thank you, firefighters, there's a bit of like, I hate this word. I'm going to say it. I'm sorry ahead of time, but like hero status, right? Which comes with mixed feelings. You don't want to be seen as a hero, but there's something nice about it. And then you come home and you're just like Joe Blow at the grocery store.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like that scene from, what is it? Hurt Locker, where he's going through the grocery store. And he's like trying to figure out how to pick out fucking cereal when every decision that he's made in the past 15 months has been made for him.
Yep.
Sometimes you feel like that.
Yeah. And it's a real loss. It's a real transition. And if you're like lost in the produce aisle because you don't know how to pick a good cantaloupe, okay, fair enough. Like normal human functioning.
And I mean, it makes sense too. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, what are we gonna have today? Oh yeah, we're gonna have, this caterer's food, or we're gonna spike out on the hill for 14 days and eat MREs. Oh yeah, there's that grimace.
Yummy.
But it's weird. I guess there's a loss of purpose there, and it kind of you don't have that serotonin bump, because when you're out in the field and you're doing cool shit with a purpose to save acres or restore habitat, or shit, even doing like junicide, where you're just killing swaths of juniper, which are invasive species, at least around here.
We killed so many in our yard last summer and it felt so good.
I fucking hate juniper with a fiery passion.
Oh, and they just like rip you up.
Oh yeah, they're not friendly. That, and they fuck up your saw too, because like rocks and shit grow in them. But anyways, you have a purpose there, right? You're doing something beneficial, and you're contributing to society, and you're contributing to Mother Nature, right? And when you come off the season, all that's gone. You're going from 120 miles an hour to practically fucking reverse.
Yes, exactly. And that's okay. Perfect transition into what the hell do we do about this? And part of it is there is a whiplash in that we have to kind of mitigate a little bit. And I think what we need to do is figure out a plan to not go from 120 to 0, but how do we bump down to like 40?
Yeah.
Right.
And then go to school zone.
Yeah.
The normal life.
Yeah. Let's just, we taught my son to drive recently. And so that like slow approach, slow braking.
Were you white knuckled on the Oh Jesus bar?
I made it through. We did it. We did it. No, he did great. But there is a learning process of braking gently, right? Oh, yeah. And so let's brake you gently into the off season. So I have some categories to consider, because I can't tell everybody what to do.
Yeah.
Everyone's individual. This is the kind of thing, though, if you don't know where to start, like call me or call a clinician. This is what we do. And we were talking a little bit about what happens in a therapy room. Shit like this. Yeah. You come in and you're like, it was a really hard season, and we figure out the different things that were hard, and then we decide what to do about it.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like we were talking about too, is the purpose is not for you to fix per se my problems.
Exactly. Yep.
It's for you to give me the tools and identify the things I need to fix so I can fix them my damn self.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. You just get the right size wrench.
Yeah. It's this idea of giving you words, right?
Yeah.
They're tools. And if I can help you identify, like I do a ton of work with clients, I'm like, okay, how do you know you're escalating? Or how do you know you're hypervigilant coming off of a shift? What are your signals? And then what do we do about that? Super like problem solve. I mean, I was raised by a first responder. Like,
so you've got it firsthand. You've seen it.
I've seen it. And I'm not in this to be like huggy and cryy like this. There's no incense. There's no, would you say Tibetan bell? Like
Tibetan prayer bells.
Yeah. Like this is like, what is the problem? Let's figure it out and let's fix it. That's my particular stance. If you're a clinician with Tibetan prayer bells, get after it. You do you.
Yeah. So run us through like a typical therapy session.
Yeah.
Like top to bottom.
Okay. So it's a little different when it's the first one, because we're just getting to know each other. I always have to do paperwork, right? So you have to come in. Part. Yeah, you have to come in and sign some paperwork. We talk about like limits of confidentiality, right? You tell me you're going to kill yourself, I'm going to go ahead and get us some help. Like there's just some limits. So we run through that, and then we just kind of dive in, and I let the client really drive where we go. It's not like you come in and I say, so where were you born? What happened when you were 2? It's more like, what's going on? Like, what are you struggling with?
Yeah. You're concise. You're to the point, which is probably an effective communication tool to first responders, those community guardians that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like get to the fucking point.
Yeah. I'm not interested in I ask a ton of questions, because I am finding the patterns, right?
Yeah.
Oops.
No, you're good.
I had to pull
That
the
thing
wire.
moves all over.
Yeah.
So-
I touched a wire. Sorry.
You're good.
So I ask a ton of questions, and we will go back and talk about childhood and stuff like that. But essentially I'm assessing for what's the problem, and then we're finding the right wrenches,
Yeah.
right? And that's a very unique thing. And usually, so I'm what's called a solution focused therapist. So I'm very first responder friendly, right? Because I'm to the point. I was at the dentist a few weeks ago, and she was like, turn your head to the left. I was very quick about it. She's like, were you in the military? I was like, no, I was raised by a firefighter. She's like, that was like precise.
It's a snap. Like, don't break your neck. Damn.
There's just some things that you do, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm solution focused, which means I'm not in this to talk about the same thing over and over, week after week, unless that's what needs to happen. Sometimes if we're talking about lots of deep therapy, lots of stuff that happened growing up, we can talk about that for weeks if it's what a client needs. But in general, let's figure out what's going on, give you some tools. And then I'm a big advocate for ongoing care. Like, come in, Wildland's a little different, right? If you're talking about a municipal crew, I'd rather see someone like once a month, like come dump. One of my clients called it dump the Legos. Like, I go see Shannon.
Just don't step on them.
Yeah, I don't step on them. We dump the Legos, we put them in little piles, and then I know what to do next.
Yeah.
So come dump the Legos every now and then go on your way.
It's kind of like taking a cluttered desk. It's like what I did before you came over, because you should have seen this thing. It was piled full of shit and mail and all this stuff. But it's like taking a cluttered desk and going through it and like saying, don't need that. And this, I need to pay this goddamn bill.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And wait, so you said every time this happened, then you couldn't sleep that night. Like that's my job, is to be like, wait, you've said this a couple times now. Let's look at it a little closer. And we just help build those connections. The exact same thing my therapist does for me.
Gotcha. So how do we handle complex issues like PTSD? Like, say, I mean, that's kind of another loaded question that I'm feeding you, of course, because there's multiple forms of PTSD. And then, so say someone with complex PTSD, which is wildland prone, prone to wildland firefighters developing complex, which is multiple events. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Multiple events over the time that have just escalated to a form of PTSD. It's not one pinpoint traumatic incident.
Yeah.
How do we digest those things? I would say someone comes into you with complex PTSD and it's kind of obvious. What do we do there?
That is a loaded question.
I know.
Okay, so let me say that my primary goal in my practice in my life is to prevent some of the complex PTSD. Like, I dream of a world where we are intervening or supporting far earlier, so it doesn't get that buildup effect.
Gotcha.
That being said, if we're 15 years in and we're talking about some really rough things and some small things. So the reason I call out some of these small losses is I think sometimes they are the rock in your shoe that is causing the biggest problem, but you don't know how to identify it.
Then you don't take the time to stop and take your boots off.
Right.
Dump that fucking rock out, right?
That's good. Go to therapy, take your boots off, get the rocks out, get back to work. It's good. I'm going to use that.
Feel free.
Yeah. I'll kick you some cash for it. So this is kind of hard to answer because there's so many different ways I could go with it.
Yeah. And it's not a one size fits all solution either.
Yeah. But part of it is just, first of all, I know in some episodes you've done this. I'm going to do it again in case anyone hasn't heard. I'm going to explain PTSD versus PTSI, because I think that's a huge stigma piece. So as clinicians, we have to use this big book called the DSM, and that's how you kind of go through and you apply a diagnosis. Within the DSM, it is called post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. That is what we have to use if we're diagnosing. I am a big advocate, though, for actually switching over to the word PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, because it is an injury. This is not a disorder. This is not that there's something inherently wrong with you and that's why you can't sleep.
Yeah, it's not like you're bipolar and have a chemical imbalance.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is a fixable thing.
Yeah. This is because you have endured, as a human being, you have endured traumas and your body is telling you that you're not okay.
Yeah.
Right. It's coming out in all the different ways that PTSD shows up. So that's like, no matter what's going on, that's my biggest thing is let's take away this idea of disorder. let's refer to it as an injury and let's kind of work on healing the injury.
Yeah. So the reason why I asked that question is because how often do you see over like a course of a career that people develop PTSI? Some way or another.
Ooh.
Because I've always wanted to get some data on this. I mean, I don't know if it's like even if it's just a personal opinion and perspective that you've seen, because the more and more I look across the wildland community, at least the people that I interact with, the more and more I see those telltale signs, the isolation, the hypervigilance, the reluctance to talk about what they've done, the silent professionalism, if you will.
Yep.
I've seen all of these telltale signs of PTSI, and I was wondering if you see the same thing. I'm not trying to say like, oh yeah, everybody has a PTSI. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But I mean, the commonality, I notice it a lot more and more and more.
It's a natural outcome to the work, right?
Yeah.
Like if you are a football player, you will have more knee injuries. It just is. If you are an accountant, you will get more carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
And you'll need glasses sooner, right? Like doing this work and it being on the front lines to so many different types of trauma and loss, the natural outcome is the symptoms of PTSI. One of my big things is we were talking about this a little bit before. I don't like diagnosing because that is saying that there's something wrong with you if you're responding this way. And my opinion is no, you are responding in an appropriate fashion. If there's some of these things going on, right? The hypervigilance, the trouble sleeping, maybe feeling a little like jumpy or like you can't relax, all these different things. That's a natural outcome.
Yeah.
I don't have numbers for you. I have looked for them. There's a research team at UNR looking for them. The numbers aren't out there in a really nice, concise way.
Yeah.
There is one study that shows if you're doing first responder work, you're probably about 10% more likely to have some sort of mental illness. But even that, I just really struggle with because I feel like,
well, what does mental illness even say? That's the thing. That's like slapping a label of like, hey, don't go near this guy because he's a fucking first responder, which is bullshit. You know, it's total bullshit.
Yeah. And it's why I get like, I'm a data geek, right? You showed me the data you collected and it's like my eyes light up.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to categorize some of this stuff. And my other thing is I don't like to say that something like PTSI is a yes or a no. Do you have it or not? It's a continuum, right?
Yeah.
We've all got struggles and symptoms, kind of like ADHD, right? Do you have to diagnose sometimes? Yeah, but you know what? Some of us are just a little bit harder to focus than others. And it's just the way we're built.
Oh, yeah.
I think categorizing gets tricky.
It does. Speaking of ADHD, have you ever noticed that? I swear to God that majority of wildland firefighters out there have some sort of ADHD.
The work is very naturally fit for that. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
But going back to the original point, there's nothing wrong with you. And I think it's important that we keep having these discussions and normalizing like the symptoms of PTSI and normalizing that the fact that you're going to at some point witness trauma in your career, period.
Yeah. If you don't, you're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Pretty much. But how do we normalize that to a point to where we can front load people to better have the tools and abilities to recognize it and then heal their injuries, their stress injuries later down the road?
This is the $1 million question, because there is this, can I talk about your data?
A little bit. No hard numbers.
Yeah, no hard numbers. Yeah. But this idea
it's all published on the internet.
Everyone is willing to, if someone comes to talk to them about their problems, they're 100% in on that.
Yeah.
But if they need to go talk to someone else about their problems, they're like, no, I'm good. And that is the biggest thing, is this idea of, I have this conversation all the time where people are like, whichever their role is, we as law enforcement need to take better care of our mental health. And if I go, well, yeah, do you want to come in? How are you doing? They're like, no, I'm good.
No.
Not me.
Yeah.
And like, we have to just continue to slowly break that down and switch into a strengths-based view of mental health care.
And sorry, I misinterpreted what you were saying there. Yeah, we could talk about the numbers. There's over 2,000 respondents to the mental health survey that I put out for 2019 fall and 2020 spring. So it was just right about pre-COVID did this survey. And I had some interesting data points in there, which you saw. It's all published on the internet on my website. If you guys want to take a look at it, www.anchorpointpodcast.com. And there's a tab on there. It says mental health survey results. So, and it's not a study.
It is not
a study. It's just hard data results. And one of those interesting things that you were just talking about was a majority, overwhelmingly, the respondents to that survey said that they do not feel comfortable talking to somebody else, even if it's a peer, coworker, or anybody else, about their mental health issues or their problems or anything like that. Versus the flip side of that is the people that are willing and receptive to someone coming to them to just talk shit out about their mental health issues. Overwhelmingly said yes, they were receptive and open and willing to do so. It was this inverse relationship, and you saw it. It's posted on there if you want to check it out. So
and it's so distinct, and it drives me freaking bonkers because it keeps people silent. So here's the other thing: if you're like, nah, I'm fine, right? Like, I'm doing fine, I'm okay.
Are you though?
I want you to take that as like, perfect. Like I always say, if you're doing fine, that's the best time to go find a clinician.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be in the middle of a horrific addiction, divorce shit show. And then you have to go sit and talk to a stranger. If you're doing fine, perfect. Go get to know somebody.
Yeah.
You guys build a relationship. And then when the really hard situation happens, you don't have to do that relationship building part.
Oh, absolutely. That ounce of prevention, it's hard to throw a fucking Band-Aid on an arterial wound. You just can't do it typically.
Yeah. But if you have someone who knows you, so my established clients, if they call me in the middle of the night, that's a different call that I'm willing to take than if I get an unknown number. Like it's just a different relationship, but you have to establish it before the crisis point.
And that's the thing too. It's like I said, it's ounce of prevention. Like the more we front load these tools in case something does happen to where you really need that tourniquet.
Yep.
If you front load this and you take the time to front load all of this stuff, you're going to be more successful in your outcome and your treatment.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like with everything else, except there's something about it that's so shameful and embarrassing. We just don't want to do it.
I think it's a point of pride and also kind of a point of contention because there's a lot to lose, especially if you're a leader or somebody who's like responsible for lives. You show a moment of weakness and people are going to fucking destroy you. They're going to eat you alive and it sucks. Yeah. It sucks. Absolutely sucks.
It's completely backwards. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where this mentality came from, but it's slowly going away, but not as fast as I or probably you would like to see it.
Right.
But how do we address the elephant in the room?
And I think it's just as individuals, we each need to kind of step up and take care of ourselves. Right.
Yeah.
Like if you're listening and you're like, I probably should talk to someone, you should. And the strong thing to do is just try it out. Like, okay. I mean, you jump out of helicopters and stuff like that. Just go talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
It's awkward. I do everything I can. Like my office has snacks. Like I don't have a traditional waiting room because those are awful.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right. Like I do everything possible to make it as comfortable as possible. But there's an element of it's awkward and that's okay. It's awkward to go to the doctor and put on the little paper robe and, you know.
It's even not more awkward to get a physical at times. So. But
it's valuable. And then the awkwardness goes away. Like I'm just a person, right? I have my own, like I'm a mess in my own life too. So if
everybody's in their own shit show.
Exactly.
Everybody is.
So there's no illusion that like clinicians have all the magic answers. No, we don't. We're humans that are living life too.
Yeah. And to normalize that too is like, yeah, humans have problems. It just, you got baggage. Well, congratulations. So everybody fucking else does. Everybody
welcome to the party. Yeah.
Welcome to the party, right? Be an adult about the situation. And that's another thing I want to point out about this discussion in this particular juncture in time that we're recording to. It is pre-shit hits the fan season right now, right? We got some activity down in the, Desert Southwest, Region 3 and stuff like that. And we have some activity in California.
Yep.
But before PL of 5 and you're scrambling for resources and you're fucking tired, go talk to somebody now.
Yep.
Because front loading that is going to be critical.
Yep. And so so this is the other thing. If you're not ready to talk to somebody, okay. Part of what I'm trying to do is make it a little less hard to reach out. Because that is a big obstacle, right? You've got to find a clinician. You've got to make the appointment. You've got to sign the papers.
Get comfortable.
Yeah, that's hard. So there's some different stuff to do. So I'm going to run through really quick, like essentially a slow down plan, right? So how do you go down to 40 miles an hour versus just coming straight to 0?
So postseason.
Gotcha. But I want you to actually write it down, make a plan now.
Here's your homework assignment, ladies and gentlemen.
Get your pens and paper, because if we write it down now, you're going to come home wrecked, you're exhausted, and you're going to thank yourself, your May self, your October, November, whenever it ends this year, self is going to thank your May self because you did the work and you wrote it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's run through a couple of these.
Send it.
Okay. So I'm going to give you some categories where you need to just take care of yourself. And we're going back to that idea of you go from 120 to 0. What you need to do is not let yourself just completely lay on the couch and check out, right? We've got to stay
guilty of that. I used to sit around, drink beer and play video games, and it was terrible.
And it's fine to a point. And the problem is if that inertia happens, and then you're just screwed.
I think that was my problem too, is like, oh yeah, what am I going to do this winter?
Mm-hmm.
Find a job, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to play a lot of video games.
Yeah. I mean, video games are fun.
They are.
And when you're exhausted, they help. But okay, so you got
it's escapism is what it is. I think that's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So you have to take care of yourself biologically and hormonally. So we talked a little bit about that high of the stress hormones.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing. And if you go from tons of stress hormones all the time to none, you're going to feel like that's a real thing.
Well, it's like an adrenaline dump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Typically, you've had a hardcore adrenaline dump, you throw up. Like you get all dizzy and start feeling weird.
Yep.
Start saying weird shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And so you have to like recognize that that's a thing and then get off the couch and go for a run, which I know your body's also wrecked. So there's going to be this fine balance between not overextending yourself, but recognize that if your body's going from all to none, let's find a way to kind of slow down the hormones. And there's some healthy stuff you can do, like go for a run, go for a hike, go skydiving. That's fine because you're just bringing yourself down off of the train. Also, just on a biological level, you are a human being, so you have to drink some water. Like, yeah, drink the beers, come home, drink the beers, have the burger, just have some water. Okay. Like it's not, we're looking for balance. I'm not going to tell you that you need to only eat kale and water. No, have a beer and a burger and drink a glass of water. Your sleep's probably going to be jacked.
Oh yeah. Super fucked.
Mm-hmm. That's real and that's okay, but try to go to sleep. Like there's organizations that do this entirely and they're awesome. So I'm not going to try to like go into it as much as they do, but there's this idea of sleep hygiene, right? So you actually develop a sleep schedule. Don't play video games till 2 a.m.
Stay off your fucking phone.
Mm-hmm. Get away from the screens and recognize that your body's going to need to adjust. And some of that's going to require a little bit of responsibility within reason.
Yeah.
Like I think the hardest thing about saying these things is everyone's like, I don't want to. I get it.
But I wanna.
I know. And I totally get it. I don't want to. I like to stay up late and drink whiskey too, but it doesn't always help. Sometimes it helps. Yeah.
Sometimes it is, but it also leads down a dark path to self-medication real quick. And
when you're coming off this train and your body's going through this shift in all your different hormones and everything, then it generally, that fall down the hill goes much faster.
Eesh. Yeah.
Let's see. What else do I have here?
Well, I'm saying, like, because I've experienced it.
Mm-hmm. It's real.
It's real. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about sensory needs too, because Wildland is high sensory, right?
Very high.
Super, like so many different ways.
It's shit. I just almost spilled LaCroix all over the place. Sorry.
Everything's okay, folks. Yeah. So much like you're out in nature is beautiful. Right. But you're also like, it's hot, right? It's fire. There's a lot of high sensory input. And that's another thing where you go from super high input and you go to your couch where there's pretty much video games is filling that need a little bit of some sensory input.
Oh yeah. Especially like playing Battlefield or something like that. Loud gunshots, stuff like that.
Giving you some of that back. So you want to instead try to find a way to get some of those inputs in a way that's healthier. And this again is going to be completely dependent on who you are and what you like. If you like to rage loud to Metallica, do that. Like make that a part of your schedule as you come back, because you know that you're kind of helping your system figure out how to come from this super high sensory place into a more day-to-day sensory place.
Oh yeah. A Wildland fire is loud. It's a loud place. You got aircraft, you got chainsaws, you got people yelling at each other. You got even something as simple as like not even cutting line, just marching like in a line up the line. You guys are walking up the line in your crew. stop and be aware of how fucking loud that is. If 20 people walking through the forest, all your shit jangling everywhere. Yeah. It's a loud place.
Up on anybody. Yeah.
Shit, even in moments of quiet, relative quiet, really be aware of how loud the forest is or the desert is. You'll start noticing how loud it actually is. There's bugs. You can hear twigs and shit snapping, birds. It's a pretty incredible place.
Yeah. And okay, so you just hit on two things that are super important too. And one is that nature sensory input. Like sit in your yard and listen to the birds. Let yourself get some of those inputs that are, so the work is super hard and traumatic, but some of these pieces of it are actually helping you cope. Being outside in nature, it's helping you cope. The physical exercise, it's helping you cope. The camaraderie with your team, all these things are helping you carry the load. And then all of a sudden you go home and you don't have any of that coping, and that does not work. Yeah. So try to carry some of those coping pieces back into the off season.
It sounds like you're putting yourself in a, like what I'm gathering here is like put yourself in a point of somewhat familiarity.
Yeah, so, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, instead of coming home to a dark apartment if you live alone, or two screaming kids and a wife that's telling you to do yard work.
Yep.
Take the time to do some stuff that's familiar and ramp down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're letting yourself adjust. Yeah. And then the other thing you just hit on is that idea of, so there's research that shows that marching in unison or anything you do in unison with other people is actually super connecting and helpful. So I'm a big geek about The Body Keeps the Score, which is a pretty popular book. And that some of his research is this idea that when we do something like dribble basketballs, sing in a choir, the unison and the connection with other people is super healing. So figuring out different ways where you can access that, it's going to be different than it is out on the line. Like you just can't like rally all your neighbors together and march around the block a few times. No. I mean, try. I would, if you live in my neighborhood, try, because I would enjoy that very much. But if you can go play basketball, go to the batting cages, right? Because that gives you a little bit of the rhythm and the impact. Anything you can do that fills that kind of sensory need is going to help you off ramp a little bit better.
That's kind of funny too, because like I was completely unaware of that was actually a thing, but I was doing it on my own.
Nice.
Right? So yeah, things like CrossFit, where it's the rhythm of barbells and shit slamming and people being exhausted. And that was very therapeutic for me, like looking back at it.
Yeah.
And then also ironically going to like punk rock shows and concerts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's in same building. They're listening to the same music at the same time.
Yep.
It's a shared experience. And I thought that was very therapeutic. Granted, I was super weird and, I don't like big crowds, so I'd stay at the back, but I'd still observe and do something I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So,
you knew your exit routes, but you were still
certainly did. Still actively participating, but I definitely knew where all the exits were and I knew who threats were. So yeah.
I was at the bank with my husband the other day and I was like, just watching this guy. He was like, what are you doing? I'm like, he's sketchy. I'm just watching him. And he's like, you're just weird. And I was like, I know. But if he was sketchy, I would have known before anyone else and we would have been out of here.
That's another common thing too, is like, yeah, that whole, and I guess you were, a lot of people have been saying that hypervigilance there is also a symptom of, trauma or PTSI.
It's hypervigilance is an adaptive way to stay safe.
Yeah.
When you're literally out in the mountains in danger. But then when you come home, it's not adaptive anymore. It's maladaptive and it makes you jumpy. It makes it hard to just do regular rhythms of life.
It's not normal to that setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just turn off. There's not a button. And so some of this transition stuff is kind of helping your body be like, oh, I'm safe now, and we have to actively do that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way to train yourself out of that and get a little bit less ramped up in a situation like that?
I think so. Yeah. Kind of like we talked about before, you train to become vigilant, right? They're training the shit out of you to identify all the different ways to stay safe. It's the same thing. We have to apply the same diligence to the off-ramp piece of it.
Gotcha.
So
now what about triggers? Because one trigger of mine that still to this day scares the shit out of me, and it like makes the hair literally stand up on the back of my neck, is the sound of hinge wood squeaking, like a tree falling over.
Okay. Yep.
And if I hear anything that is remotely close to that, like there's a very distinct sound that wood makes when it's bending, right? Which indicates,
or when it's about to start. Yeah.
When it's about to go over.
Mhm.
That triggers me to this
Mhm.
day. What were some like tips to deal and cope with that? Because I know a lot of people out there have triggers and it could be different. I mean,
Mhm.
you just insert any trigger
Mhm.
for any particular individual. It's not a one size fits all. This is just my point of view.
Mhm.
So how do we cope with those triggers?
Yeah. Well, first let's define it,
Okay.
right? Because it's also one of those words that's gotten super overused, right? All the kids are like,
Triggers.
I'm so triggered by that. Like,
Yeah.
stop it.
Grow up.
But it's a real thing. It's a real biological process that
Yeah.
happens where, so there was a situation or many, many situations where that noise indicated danger,
Mhm.
right? So you hear the noise, your body goes on full alert because you need to run, right? A tree's going to fall on you is essentially what your body's interpreting that noise as. That same noise is going to bring about the same biological response. And that is your body operating properly. So this is the tricky thing about triggers is, again, it goes back to that idea of we feel like we're fucked up. And it's like, no, your body's actually being protective. That
Yeah.
noise equals danger. Your body has kind of decided this noise equals danger and it's responding.
Yeah. You're reacting to a stimulus.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's totally normal. And it's, so triggers can be, sounds are huge. Smells are huge.
Oh yeah. Two stroke.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That elicits a different response out of me. That's like an excitement response, not a
Mhm.
fear response.
Which those two are kind of two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
right? This it's an activation, right?
Yeah.
You're like, your system is ready. Let's go. And fear is the same. It's just more, there's more danger. Yeah. So triggers are basically your body saying, oh shit, something's going to happen. You can learn to deal with them because essentially I want you to think about your body is activating. So you can use deep breaths, you can use some grounding exercises, some mindfulness to just bring your body back down. But it is unfortunately part of your story that you will carry. Doing the work means we carry pieces of the story.
Yeah.
forward.
Everybody's got baggage. I
Mhm.
mean, some more than others. And like you said, it's not a one size fits all scenario, but
Mhm.
it's just shit that we got to address. And that's the thing is like, we're going to be more productive in our line of work
Mhm.
if we can identify and be more aware of these issues that,
Exactly.
trigger the individual, I guess you could say, or
Mhm.
there's that word again, trigger, but the things that we need to cope with and
Mhm.
heal from. I think that's like one of the big takeaways from this whole discussion.
It's part of your story, and it's not shameful that there are things that are going to trigger you. It's part of your story.
Yeah.
It's part of what, like, you are more likely than me to have a chainsaw scar, right? That's part of your story. I am more likely than you to have a whole bunch of really sad stories in my head because that's part of my work. It's just part of who we are, and there's an impact from it.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to carry our burden.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. But the normalization and saying, recognizing the fact that this is normal, this
Mhm.
is okay, this is part of, not necessarily part of the gig, but part of being a human,
Exactly.
period.
Yeah. That shame and confusion and silence that's the part that keeps us suffering, I think.
I think that's the part that fucks us up,
Mhm.
hands down.
Mhm.
So we don't talk about this, and I'm so happy that there's been such a ramp up in people being willing to talk about this.
Mhm.
And hey, this is my perspective. This is oftentimes a shared perspective by a lot of our community,
Mhm.
and then having it backed up and pretty much validated. Well, not necessarily validated, but I guess you could say validated by the clinician side of things.
Mhm.
This is normal.
Yeah.
Let's fucking act like it.
This is humanity. You are doing a good job. You feel like a wreck, but that means you're doing a good job. It means you have emotions, you have experiences like that. The people I get really worried about are the ones who are like, no, I don't feel anything. I'm like, oh.
So
we're gonna work
what
on
flavor
this.
are we? Are we a sociopath?
We're going to work on this for a while. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings up a good point though. Is like, what happens? What are this is another loaded question, but the consequences of not addressing these things, like what happens? What are like the severe outcomes? We obviously know that the S word is going to be one of those outcomes. It could be one of those outcomes.
S word, suicide.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's just take a second and normalize suicide too. Suicide comes with so much stigma in and of itself.
Mhm.
My stance on it is suicide is an option for all of us. Like it's an option. The concern is, when does it start becoming one of the bigger options, right? If it's way down on your list, it's option number, 742. That's great. But when it's option number 3 And then you have a really hard season. And then all of a sudden it's option number 2. And then you're in so much pain and life is so dark that it becomes option number 1. That is also a human experience. It's not good. It's not what we want. But I think when we're like, what the fuck is wrong with them? How did they do that? It almost just minimizes everyone else who has it at an option 3.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing too, is like, we have a real fucking problem with suicide in the wildland community. I mean, we don't have any data on it, any hard data.
It's secret. Yeah.
Which is disturbing, but it's not like you can research it, because we also have suicides that happen during the fire season. And then we have your unaccounted for ones that have happened off season.
Yep.
And that's the thing that I think that we need to really address, is that it doesn't have to be option 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
And it's okay if you're like, oh my gosh, it's become option 7. Like, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That, you know,
let's try and get that back down to option 738 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's build up the other options. And it's like, I've had nights and mornings where I'm like, I just don't want to do it. Like, you're not going to come in and I'm going to look at you like, oh no, you're one of those. It's like, okay, life is really rough right now. Let's figure out how to make it a little better.
Yeah.
And I think that taking the stigma away from suicide is part of how we start to help with the problem.
It's an uncomfortable topic, but it needs to be talked about, because it is the elephant in our room. I mean, like one of my good friends, Nelda, she was saying that we have a lot of suicides that are classified as accidents as well. You know, they fell asleep at the wheel and veered off the road, or X, Y, or Z happened. And I know personally, coming from my own point of view, I've thought about it. I know I have.
Yeah. It's bumped up the list. Like it happens.
Yeah.
And it's not broken. It's human.
Yeah. But the idea behind that is to not make it your only option. And that's where someone like you would come in, or the crisis hotline, or shit, even talking to friends. I mean, talking to anybody, you know, it's a hard conversation to have, but as long as we can get these folks that are at that point of, you know, this is making more and more sense to me, pointed in the right directions to heal and fix those underlying issues that are causing that thought process behind being number 1.
Yep.
Is way out. Getting the point in the right direction is the ultimate goal there. And it's a hard conversation to have.
It's a super hard conversation. And, you know, going back to your question, which is like, what are some of the outcomes if it's unaddressed? I feel like there's this snowball that happens. And if we can talk about it after the first season, right? You're coming off of your very first season. You're like, whoa, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And a little weird. And you can either, I mean, honestly, I would love if we were talking a little bit about like after action reports, even within your crew, doing like, okay, let's list really quick some of the stuff that was bad.
Yeah.
And let's just normalize, I was afraid. I was sad. And if even just doing that for the new kids is huge, right? Normalizing that this was hard. This sucked. I kind of want to go home. I kind of don't. That in and of itself will start to help with the compounding, whatever shit show.
The compounding shit show.
Yeah. There's another, that's like
a very
$4.
scientific word there.
I am a very scientific person. Yeah.
But no, you have a point there. I mean, that's the thing, is like you're saying, normalize it and fucking talk about it. Like it's bullshit if you think that you're going to be the type of leadership that's going to just like say, oh, it's not my fucking problem. Figure it out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I will say it. If you're that kind of leader, fuck you with a capital F.
Yeah. You're causing harm. And I think sometimes leaders are causing harm when they think they're protecting.
There's also that caveat too.
Like that, and whether it's self-protective, right? I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to say that I was afraid, all this stuff that causes harm. But also I think there's this like, no, we got to be tough. We can't freak out up there. So everyone tough it up. And that's protective in a way.
Yeah.
In the moment, right? Because you've got to survive the situation, but you've also got to learn how to come back down off of that. And that second piece just doesn't happen.
Not too often. I mean, sometimes it does. And the whole CISM program, like we were talking about, critical incident stress management or debriefings, they're getting better, but you know, I've seen the good and the bad out of those.
Yep.
But they are getting better. So don't take those things for granted.
Yeah. It's a chance to hear that other people struggled, and they're tricky when it can get tricky when there's leadership in the room. It can get tricky if it feels punitive.
It feels like an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the point of it, though. That's the whole thing. And we were talking about this too. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to see that now, coming from a much more mature standpoint. Well, maybe not much more, but somewhat more mature standpoint, outside looking in. But it's not meant to be punitive. And also you have a very, very limited field of vision when you're in a real shitty situation or a real tight situation. You can only see what's pretty much right in front of you. So now if you can have the opportunity to expand your awareness outside of what you saw, you can start to piece together what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. And that can be huge for some of the guilt, right? Or the like, what if I had done this differently, right? We're talking about some of the hard situations. Like, we can spin ourselves in circles about what if we had made this decision or that decision. And sometimes it doesn't matter what you did. Like, shit happens.
Oh yeah.
And a CISM can help kind of dispel a little bit of that guilt when they're done right. Yeah.
They could also, I mean, I know a lot of the CISM teams now are bringing some more tools like clinicians to the CISM thing, the whole CISM debrief. And they're also giving like more tools to point people in the right directions for when they do go back to their home unit.
Yep.
If it happens on district, usually they bring in their own, but if you're off district or in a different force or different area of the United States, they'll give you the tools.
Good. So, I'm glad to hear that. And there's, like we were talking about my dog, right? Like, part of why it's important for me to have a dog is sometimes you don't need me. You need my dog. I'm just
a little floofy.
Yeah. Send the dog in. And that's what, we were up doing some visits at dispatch and stuff, because when rough calls come in, sometimes you don't necessarily even have words or want to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's why we got dogs. Mine's named Chuck. He'll come visit. Yeah.
Aw. Therapy dogs are awesome though. That's another underutilized thing too. That's what I want to do with my dog. One of them at least. One's not quite there on the maturity. Yeah, Benelli. But Kimber, I wouldn't mind making her or like getting her into the, therapy dog kind of thing, and just visiting fire camps. Like, here, pet the dog.
Yeah.
Pet the puppy.
And it's legit helpful. It goes back to that, we're talking about kind of getting your hormones and your stress system all even back out. Dogs work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Or whatever your flavor of, fuzzy animal. I mean, cats.
I saw a therapy horse in an Apple store once. It was real weird.
That is an aggressive therapy animal.
It was a mini one, but you're waiting.
Oh, it was a mini one.
You're waiting at the Genius Bar, and everyone stops, and it's because this lady just walked in with a horse. I was like, this is the Apple store. Do we do that here? Yeah.
Hey, at least they're taking the tools that they need to cope with their thing. Yeah. I mean, granted, I know a lot of people that use that as like a bullshit excuse to bring, I don't know, a boa constrictor onto an airplane. I don't know, but
yeah, I've had people ask me to write letters. I'm like, no, because it's a real thing when someone needs it, and no, you're just kind of, devaluing the purpose behind that in the first place. But yeah, what can you do? But yeah, no, I just want to say that like the front end and the back end loading to this whole discussion is absolutely critical. And for the folks out there listening, just stop being a fucking hard ass. Yeah. It's okay to talk about this stuff. I mean, shit, I don't have any problem talking to anybody online. I know a few of you folks have hit me up and shared some stories, and well, I guess might have helped some of you or may not have, but yeah, folks are definitely out there to help, just like Shannon here. Yeah. And saying something is one of the hardest and best. Like, just put some air into it, Oh yeah. That was like another thing too, is like everybody that I've talked to that have dealt with some sort of mental health issue or some sort of problem or even some PTSI or PTSD, the moment that they felt relief is admitting that they needed help. That was like the biggest, it's like having a pallet of bricks lifted off your chest. Yep. Yeah. There's research that shows that people begin to feel better as soon as they book a therapy appointment. They haven't even shown up. They don't even know. But the fact that they raised their hand and said, I'm going to do this for myself, begins the process of feeling better. See, there we go. Sometimes just knowing that you have a problem is even therapeutic. Yeah, exactly. Now, if we can admit to these problems,
Because I know a lot of folks out there might have some.
Yeah.
Not an accusatory statement or anything like that, but we deal with shit. That's what we do.
Well, and let's go back because you asked the question about what happens if you don't take care of it.
Yes.
Suicide is obviously an outcome. Addiction is obviously an outcome.
Yes.
Divorce is obviously an outcome. But let's like bump forward on those because those are, if we're getting way down the line. If you are coming back and you just don't know how to talk to the people around you, right?
Yeah.
That's a signal that like life is hard. It's okay. Go have somebody help you with that. If you and your spouse are getting a little bit more distant, if we're having affairs, right? If there's something where it's just not working, you're not connecting, you're not enjoying time together. If you come home and in the off season, you can't figure out how to have fun. We were talking before recording about like COVID has made us lose our ability to have fun. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those symptoms where if you just don't know what to do for fun anymore, especially if the only things that are fun are those super high intensity things, right? You can't skydive every day.
I wish you could. That'd be freaking awesome.
I mean, I guess you could become an instructor, but then you got to strap people to you. So I don't know. Right? Like if the only thing that brings you any sense of joy is super high intensity.
Yeah.
That's a signal. Like maybe this isn't working.
Chasing that high again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can't do like, if you struggle to go to like concerts and stuff like that, that's totally fine. But if you're struggling to go to like family events or any like restaurants, places where being near crowds has that vigilant side of you, just unable to relax, go talk to someone. You don't want to live life unable to go to parties or restaurants, right?
Yeah. You're getting like to the form of dysfunction in society there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Start to get super isolated. If you're playing the video games constantly and you feel like you can't stop. Yeah. So those are some of the things to look for.
Bringing it all the way back to the beginning, we were talking about COVID and the forgetfulness thing. Mm-hmm. I've also noticed that with particular traumas, we have memory lapses. Mm-hmm. What is up with that?
Well, some of it's protective, right? Your body's like, nope, reject that one, right?
Yeah. And
that's a part of like, if you do EMDR or something like that, it's helping you kind of put your memories back in order, which helps us deal with them. It's a coping and it's a stress outcome, right?
The forgetfulness is like there's a couple of events that I've had in my fire career. I've told you a couple of them. Mm-hmm. And, I can remember like very specifics, but like some of the like weird specifics, like what the fucking weather was that day. But like the general overall thing, a lot of people can like tell you this is what happened. We went through this and give you a progressional kind of outcome of like what the day was like. But some of those things, some of those fires or some of those like traumatic fires that I've been on and I've experienced, bits and pieces, otherwise fucking nothing. And sometimes entire portions of my fire career are like that. So I don't know if that's like a common thing with the forgetfulness, but I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but I've noticed it just now after Mike West was on the show and said something about that, the forgetfulness thing. What is with that?
I think it's just, so, if you're forgetting an entire season, some of that is probably just exhaustion and stress. And I have a horrible memory, right? Sometimes
I can't even remember what I ate for fucking breakfast.
Remember when we did this in third grade? I'm like, I don't remember third grade. Like, and it's not because anything was particularly wrong. It's because I just don't remember. So some of it's that.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about sleep deprivation, MREs, right? Like your body is already highly stressed. So you may just not be putting all the files in, right? But then the trauma piece of it is, like you said, your field of vision narrows.
Yeah.
So you may not be picking up all the details. And it's a protective way. Our bodies are like, no, we're not gonna remember every single piece of this. As far as how common it is, I don't have any data for you because it is another one of those things that people don't talk about. Right.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say something else, but I forgot. Weird.
Whoa.
Uh-oh. I can't remember.
I must not remember.
I know what I was going to say. Going back to triggers.
Yes.
This is what's tricky is our bodies sometimes remember. So you may not remember.
But you have a physical memory of it.
And so there's the smell or there's a taste or there's whatever it is. And you've got this and this is where people start thinking they're crazy. Right? You've got this flood of response and you're like, I don't even know what's wrong. Our bodies remember. Right. And so that's real. If it's happening, it's real. It's okay. You're not broken. Let's work it out.
That's another thing too, is a lot of people, a lot of people have mentioned like auditory hallucinations. Like they'll smell something and they'll hear like a chainsaw, like look around or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's, I don't know. The brain is a very complex organ.
Mm-hmm.
It does what it wants.
It like really
Literally.
does. Yeah.
Literally does what you want, what it wants. Portions of it.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, no, like I said, I keep reiterating this point, but I'm going to say it again and again and again until it gets you through your thick-skulled caveman and cavewoman brains that we need to have this discussion and normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's May.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is normal.
It's normal. Yeah. And let me just run through these other things really quick because I want to make sure people have tools. So you're coming off of the season. You're trying to slow to 40. We talked about biological and hormonal. We talked about nature a bit, but I need you to get outside. Like, do not sit in your stanky couch and play the video games because you're literally losing some of the fresh air, sunshine. That's key. One of the big things you lose is that battle camaraderie, right? Mm-hmm. So as much as you can stay connected, do that, because there's going to be, and I'll just name that, like, you're going to come off the season and you know, come home and talk to your spouse, and it's just not going to feel as close and connected as this bus full of stinky people that you just came home from. And some of that is real. It doesn't mean that your marriage is over. It's just that you're coming off of this battle camaraderie and you need to ramp up your connection with your spouse. But don't just go cold turkey on talking to the people that you've just been through this whole ordeal with. Also know that you're going to lose. We talked about this a little bit already, that focused mission. Like, if you can plan ahead of time on some mission that you will accomplish when you come back, even if it is the junipers in your backyard, giving yourself that purpose in whatever way you can is super important to the off ramp.
Gotcha. It's funny that you say that too. The battle camaraderie. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's real.
Oh yeah. There's nothing like suffering with, you know, your friends out there. I think it kind of becomes a little bit of addictive thing, but that suffer culture, you know, but there's definitely something to be said about the types of bonds that you create with each other when you're embracing the suck, when you guys are in the shit.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to replicate that. And it'll be hard for that to be in your marriage, and just acknowledge that, like, yes, that same level of connection and intimacy can be there. But if you haven't like been through some really harrowing situations, it might be a little different, and that's okay.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't mean your marriage is bad. It's just different.
Oh yeah. There's another thing too, is like, that open communication between your significant other and you needs to be there. You need to figure out effective forms of communication to, like, talk about shit. Like, hey, this is just what I'm feeling today.
And we don't know how to do that. If you don't know how to do that, okay. Like, we're not always taught how to talk about these things. And so if you need help learning I to talk about it, okay, that's fine. Come talk to me.
That's
like,
what you're here for.
Yeah,
Literally.
I do this, and every couple's different, right? The non-guardian spouse doesn't always want to hear the details.
Yeah.
So I'll work with clients and, like, here's how you share, like, what it was like without sharing the details, right? We don't need to describe why you needed the kitty litter, right? Like, but you can describe how you feel now. Yeah. And that's a skill that you have to learn. And if you don't know, it's okay.
It takes work. That's for sure. Yeah. That, and going back to don't cut off cold turkey as well with the camaraderie there, the battle camaraderie. Take the time to, in the off season, be like, hey, so-and-so, this part was fucked up and this is why. Let's see what the conversation comes out of that. Like, talk about shit, you know?
Exactly.
Communication seems like a pretty important component of this.
Potentially. Yeah. Pretty much key.
Oh man. So what else have we got?
That's pretty much what I have. Just, I always want to make sure that I give practical tools. So make your plan ahead of time. Know that you're going to need to bring yourself down slowly, and as much as you can prepare before you're just in the hole. Yeah.
And that's before your season starts, and then before your season ends. Yeah. So the ramp downs, or ramp up and ramp down, preparing that, have a plan. And Minda has also said this too. She said it, every therapist or clinician that I've talked to is like, have a fucking plan, period.
It's like going to the grocery store without a list, right?
Yeah.
You go to the grocery store without a list
And you're hungry.
and you're hungry, you're going to buy some cookies. Like, it's going to happen. And if you go in with a list, you might still get cookies, but at least you'll get stuff for dinner, right? Same thing. Make a list.
I'm not allowed in Costco anymore without my wife. I need to be supervised in Costco. So I'll walk in there with, no plan, no purpose. Walk out with a TV, 2 handles of whiskey, and a case of oatmeal.
Yeah. My husband and son went unsupervised, and I came home to a freezer so full of waffles, I couldn't put anything in. I was like, how many damn Eggos did you guys buy?
Yes.
It was a lot.
It was, yes.
It was
waffles.
a lot of waffles. Yeah.
Well, shit. Yeah. Well, Shannon, thank you for being on the show. And where can we find you?
So my company's called Stack of Stones, right? Cairn in the forest. Find your direction.
There we go.
So my website is stackofstones.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Find me. My phone number's on there. Reach out. If you're having a hard time, reach out. I can, as a clinician, I can see anyone in Nevada using telehealth. If you're in like Susanville or Tahoe and you can drive into Nevada, I can see you. I can also do some coaching stuff, which will be a little bit different than the clinical work, but I can do coaching stuff from anywhere.
Sweet.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. And then at the end of the show, I always like to give the opportunity for you to give a shout out to a homie, a hero, a mentor. Could be multiple, could be a few. Take it away.
I knew you were going to ask this question. And I thought about it, and I still set on my original answer, which I think is my parents. Like, my dad faithfully served as a first responder. My mom faithfully served as a first responder's wife. And I think that that's the kind of thing I didn't even understand. Like, he'd be gone flying air attack months, and she was home with us. Like, I had no problem with it then, but now that I have kids, I'm like, right? Single parenting for months. And so I think them doing the work, serving their community, still married.
That's a feat in itself right there.
I know. I think they just hit 46 years. My 20-year anniversary was yesterday.
Hey, congratulations. Congratulations to your folks as well.
Yeah. Long time married. And they taught us how to get our asses outside, have a good time. Like, we laugh a lot as a family. And I just really appreciate that they did the work, held it together, and built that foundation for us.
Nice. Well, shout out to your folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Single parent. That's, yeah. That's rough.
And I mean, I was a kid and she did a great job. So I was like, la, la, la. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, months. Yeah.
That's good. Oh, rough. But the communication kept it together. So it is possible. It might be difficult, but it is possible to keep that together.
Yep.
So, well, Shannon, thank you so much for being on the show. And hopefully we can get you back on here again.
Sounds great. I'm around.
All right, guys. Take care. See ya.
Bye.
And boom. Ladies and gentlemen, there we go. Another epic show with my good friend, Shannon Mead. Shannon, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your expertise and knowledge in the realm of mental health and culturally competent clinicians. It's definitely a good topic to be discussed, and I definitely appreciate it. We're going to have a long season and even a longer winter. I know those winters are pretty damn hard for a lot of folks out there. And the data that we're discussing off record there definitely shows that. So, Shannon, thank you once again for being on the show. And if you guys want to get a hold of Shannon and pick her brain or maybe go visit her, go to www.stackofstones.com and check out her practice. She's pretty legit. She's awesome. And we got to develop a bigger, wider network for these culturally competent clinicians to give us some help that we need when we need it. That being said, Shannon, thank you so much for being on the show. To the rest of you, stay safe, stay savage this fire season. And keep your head on a swivel and keep the conversation going about mental health. It's definitely the elephant in the room, and we need to be more open about it. I think it takes more courage and more bravery to actually be open about these topics than to be closed off. Special shout out to our sponsors. We got Mystery Ranch, purveyors of the finest damn packs on this planet. So if you have any load-bearing essentials or need any load-bearing essentials, go over to www.mysteryranch.com. And while you're at it, check out the Backbone Series and Backbone Scholarship. We've got Hot Shot Brewery, purveyors of the finest damn coffee the most kick-ass coffee for the most kick-ass causes here on the West Coast. We also have our good buddy Booze over at the Ass Movement. If you got a problem pooper on your crew, well, go over to www.thefirewild.com and check out the Ass Movement and spread that poo-bearing propaganda. And last but not least, we have the Smoky Generation. Pretty epic. I think that one goes without saying. So, Bethany, you have a kick-ass organization over there, and if you guys want to find out more, go over to www.wildfireexperience.org. I don't know why I'm whispering, but www.wildfireexperience.org and check it out. For the rest of you, stay safe, stay savage. Peace out.